I've waited 18 years for this moment, and now she's going to pay. The words echoed in Sarah's mind, each syllable laced with years of pain and betrayal. It was June 2024, and at 55 years old, Sarah was finally ready. After nearly 2 decades, she was about to confront the woman who had stolen everything from her. But this wasn't a crime of passion. This was something far more sinister, something that had been meticulously planned, step by step, over years of waiting, watching, and obsessing. Rewind to 2006. Life was perfect, or so it seemed. Sarah, then 37, lived in Williamsburg, a modest town where she and her husband, Mark, had built a life together. They had 2 beautiful children, Emily and Jacob, ages 6 and 8. Their house wasn't extravagant, but it was home, a place filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Sarah had always been the glue that held the family together. She supported Mark through his career as a small business owner, all while being a dedicated mother. She was the heart of their family. But in the early months of 2006, cracks began to show. Mark became distant. His late nights at the office became more frequent, and the affectionate gestures that had once been so natural between them were now awkward, forced. Sarah noticed it, but like many in her situation, she buried her suspicions. After all, Mark had always been a faithful husband. They had been through hard times before, but they'd always pulled through. Then Lisa entered their lives. Lisa was an acquaintance, someone Sarah had met through a mutual friend. She was charming, confident, and always seemed to know how to say the right thing. At first, Sarah had no reason to suspect her. She even welcomed Lisa into their home for dinner parties, not realizing that her kindness was slowly paving the way for betrayal. By the fall of 2006, Sarah's life was unrecognizable. The pieces of the affair came together slowly. Innocent text messages, unexplained absences, and finally the devastating discovery. It was a crisp October evening when Sarah found out the truth. Mark had left his phone on the kitchen counter, and for the first time in their marriage, Sarah looked through it. What she found shattered her world. The messages between Mark and Lisa were undeniable, intimate, secretive, and cruel. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the evidence of their betrayal. Her breath caught in her throat as the enormity of it all came crashing down. She felt like a fool, betrayed by the man she had loved for over a decade, and by the woman she had once called a friend. By December 2006, the affair was no longer a secret. Mark left Sarah and their children just before Christmas. The holiday season, once filled with joy and family traditions, became a reminder of everything she had lost. Mark moved in with Lisa, leaving Sarah to pick up the pieces of a life she no longer recognized. But the pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. Sarah's body ached from the stress, the sleepless nights, the constant replaying of every conversation, every moment that had led to this. Her children were confused and hurt, unable to understand why their father was no longer a part of their daily lives. Emily, who had always been close to her father, cried herself to sleep most nights while Jacob retreated into silence, his once cheerful demeanor replaced by a quiet anger. Sarah tried to hold it together for the sake of her children, but inside she was crumbling. Her mind was consumed with thoughts of revenge. She couldn't let Lisa get away with what she had done, not after everything she had taken from her. But Sarah knew she had to be smart. She couldn't act in the heat of the moment. She had to wait. She had to be patient. As 2007 began, Sarah's life was a shadow of what it once was. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love now felt cold and empty. Mark and Lisa were together, and though Sarah's friends told her to move on, to start anew, she couldn't. Every day felt like a reminder of the life she had lost, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't let go of the anger that burned inside her. For the first few months, Sarah's mind was consumed by thoughts of Lisa. She imagined confronting her, screaming at her, demanding answers. But as the weeks turned into months, Sarah realized that wasn't enough. Screaming at Lisa wouldn't undo the damage that had been done. It wouldn't bring back the life she had before, the marriage she had believed in. No, if she was going to get her revenge, it had to be calculated. It had to be patient. Sarah's life on the surface moved on. She enrolled in therapy, started working part-time, and focused on being a mother. But beneath the surface, her obsession with Lisa grew. She started to watch Lisa's life from a distance. She followed her on social media, checked in on mutual friends to see how she was doing. Lisa and Mark seemed happy, but Sarah knew better. No relationship that started with betrayal could stay perfect. And she was right. By the summer of 2007, whispers began to circulate that Mark and Lisa were having problems. The honeymoon phase of their relationship was over, and the cracks were starting to show. Sarah heard through mutual friends that Lisa was struggling to adjust to life with Mark, that the passion had faded, and the reality of their situation was beginning to set in. Sarah savored every piece of information, knowing that Lisa's perfect life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. But Sarah wasn't ready to act yet. She knew she had to wait, to bide her time. From 2007 to 2009, she played the long game. She kept her distance, raising her children, going to work, and slowly rebuilding her life. But all the while she watched. She waited for the perfect moment. By 2009, Sarah had become an expert at hiding her true feelings. To the outside world, she was a woman who had moved on, a woman who had found peace. But inside, the fire of revenge still burned. She spent hours imagining how she would make Lisa pay. She considered everything, from public humiliation to destroying Lisa's career. But none of it felt right. Sarah knew that when the time came, she needed to strike at Lisa's most vulnerable point. She just had to find out what that was. As the years passed, Sarah perfected the art of patience. By 2010, she had managed to mask her bitterness beneath a calm, collected exterior. To the outside world, she appeared to be moving on. Her children were growing up. She had taken a full-time job, and she even started dating again. But inside, nothing had changed. The anger was still there, dormant, waiting. And so was she. Lisa and Mark were still together, but Sarah knew their relationship was strained. The first few years after their affair had been a whirlwind for them. Parties, vacations, a new house. But by 2010, the glamour of their relationship had faded. Sarah watched from a distance as their perfect life started to crumble. She heard whispers that Mark had lost a significant amount of money in a failed business venture. Friends of friends mentioned that Lisa was growing increasingly unhappy, especially after the birth of their first child in 2011. This was a twist Sarah hadn't anticipated. When she heard Lisa was pregnant, a new wave of rage surged through her. Not only had Lisa stolen her husband, but now she had the family that should have been Sarah's. It was almost too much to bear. Sarah began to intensify her quiet surveillance. She would drive by their house at night, watching the lights in their windows, wondering what was happening inside. She noticed the changes. Mark's car parked outside less frequently, Lisa looking more tired and frazzled when she left the house. But Sarah knew that she couldn't act yet. She needed more. She needed to wait until Lisa was at her weakest. So she continued watching, collecting information like pieces of a puzzle, waiting for the moment when everything would fall apart. In 2012, that moment finally came. Sarah had followed Lisa's life closely enough to know that her marriage to Mark was hanging by a thread. They argued constantly, and there were rumors of infidelity, this time on Lisa's side. It seemed that the woman who had once been so confident, so sure of herself, was now struggling to keep her life together, and Sarah couldn't help but relish in it. In early 2013, Lisa filed for divorce. The marriage that had started with betrayal and deceit had finally crumbled under the weight of its own lies. Mark moved out, leaving Lisa to raise their 2-year-old daughter on her own. For Sarah, this was the moment she had been waiting for. She knew Lisa was vulnerable now. She was a single mother, financially strained and emotionally broken. But Sarah wasn't done waiting. The divorce was just the beginning. Sarah wanted to see Lisa's life fall apart completely before she made her move. And so she continued to watch, biding her time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. By 2014, Sarah's patience was paying off. Lisa's life was in shambles, and Sarah was finally beginning to see the cracks widen. Mark had remarried quickly after the divorce, leaving Lisa alone to deal with their child and a mounting pile of bills. The life that Lisa had stolen from Sarah had unraveled into a mess of financial struggles and failed relationships. It was poetic justice, and Sarah took satisfaction in knowing that Lisa was getting what she deserved. But as much as Sarah enjoyed watching Lisa's downfall, she knew it wasn't enough. She had waited nearly a decade for this moment, and she wasn't going to let it end with just a divorce. Sarah's revenge needed to be something more personal, more destructive. She needed to hit Lisa where it hurt the most, her reputation. Lisa had always been known as a successful businesswoman, and despite her personal troubles, she had managed to maintain her professional image. Sarah knew that if she could ruin Lisa's career, it would be the final blow. But it wouldn't be easy. Lisa had built a network of powerful connections over the years, and it would take careful planning to bring her down. In mid-2014, Sarah began gathering information about Lisa's business dealings. She reached out to old friends pretending to be interested in reconnecting, when in reality she was fishing for gossip. Slowly, she pieced together a picture of Lisa's professional life, her successes, her failures, and, most importantly, her vulnerabilities. It wasn't long before Sarah discovered the opportunity she had been waiting for. In early 2015, Lisa's company was involved in a major financial scandal. It was a minor blip in the news cycle, and Lisa managed to escape public scrutiny relatively unscathed. But Sarah knew that if she could find the right leverage, she could use this scandal to destroy Lisa's reputation once and for all. Throughout 2015 and 2016, Sarah worked quietly in the background, gathering evidence, forging connections, and preparing for her final move. She was patient, meticulous, and utterly focused. She knew that she only had one shot to get it right, and she wasn't going to rush it. As 2016 came to a close, Sarah was ready. She had all the pieces in place. Lisa's life had already been devastated by her failed marriage. But now Sarah was going to take the one thing Lisa had left, her career. But before she could execute her plan, something unexpected happened. In late 2016, Lisa was diagnosed with a serious illness. For a moment, Sarah hesitated. Was this fate's way of delivering justice? Should she back off and let nature take its course? But then Sarah remembered all the years of pain, all the nights spent crying herself to sleep, all the moments she had watched Lisa live the life that should have been hers. This wasn't fate's job, this was hers. And with that, Sarah set her plan into motion. By 2017, Sarah had everything she needed to bring Lisa down. Over the past few years, she had gathered enough dirt on Lisa's business dealings to sabotage her career. But the news of Lisa's illness had caused Sarah to hesitate momentarily. Still, she was resolute. This was not just about letting life take its course. Sarah wanted to be the one to take everything from Lisa, just as Lisa had taken everything from her. It had been over a decade since the betrayal, and while Lisa's life had slowly fallen apart, Sarah's fire for revenge burned just as fiercely as ever. Lisa's illness became public knowledge in early 2017. She had been diagnosed with a serious but treatable form of cancer. While the news sent waves of sympathy through their shared social circles, Sarah felt no compassion. Instead, she saw this as an opportunity, a moment of vulnerability that she could exploit. Sarah knew that Lisa would be focused on her health and distracted from the things around her, which made this the perfect time to strike. As Lisa underwent treatment and her public appearances dwindled, Sarah worked in the shadows. She reached out to old acquaintances, presenting herself as a concerned friend who was eager to help Lisa in her time of need. She used these interactions to gather more information, subtly planting seeds of doubt about Lisa's business practices. By mid-2017, Sarah had quietly inserted herself into conversations with people who held influence in Lisa's industry. She portrayed Lisa as a woman struggling not only with her illness, but also with maintaining her business. Sarah hinted that Lisa's company was on shaky ground, laying the foundation for what would soon become a full-scale public relations disaster. As Lisa continued her treatments, Sarah methodically leaked small pieces of information about the financial scandal Lisa's company had been involved in a few years earlier. Each piece was just damning enough to spark rumors, but not enough to cause a full-blown investigation. It was a slow, calculated attack designed to weaken Lisa's standing in the industry. By late 2018, Sarah's plan was in full swing. The rumors had spread, and Lisa's once strong professional reputation was beginning to crack. Sarah watched from a distance as Lisa's illness took its toll. Lisa had always been a strong, confident woman, but now she was visibly worn down, both physically and emotionally. Her once vibrant business was beginning to falter, and the whispers about her mismanagement had grown louder. Yet despite everything, Lisa had no idea that Sarah was behind it all. To Lisa, it seemed like her world was falling apart by chance, a combination of bad luck, illness, and financial difficulties. She had no reason to suspect that the woman she had betrayed over a decade ago was quietly orchestrating her downfall from behind the scenes. By the end of 2018, Sarah had positioned herself perfectly. Lisa's company was struggling, her health was in decline, and her personal life was in disarray. Mark, the man Lisa had left Sarah for all those years ago, had moved on with his new family and was barely in contact with Lisa anymore. Lisa was alone, isolated, and vulnerable, exactly where Sarah wanted her. But Sarah wasn't done yet. She had spent years waiting for this moment, and she wasn't going to rush the final act of her revenge. She wanted to see Lisa completely and utterly broken, and she knew that the best way to do that was to strike when Lisa thought she was beginning to recover. In early 2019, Lisa's cancer went into remission. She began to regain her strength, and for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope in her life. She started making plans to rebuild her business and reclaim her place in the industry. The worst, she thought, was behind her. But Sarah knew better. The stage was set, and now it was time for the final act. The year 2020 marked the beginning of the end for Lisa. She had emerged from her battle with cancer and was ready to rebuild her life. It seemed like the universe had finally decided to give her a break. Little did she know, the most devastating blow was yet to come, and it wouldn't come from fate. It would come from Sarah. In January 2020, Lisa began making public appearances again. She had managed to stabilize her business despite the rumors that had circulated over the previous years. Her remission had given her a renewed sense of purpose, and she was determined to prove that she could bounce back stronger than ever. But Sarah was ready. She had waited 14 years for this moment, and she wasn't going to let Lisa rebuild the life she had spent so long trying to destroy. Now that Lisa was back in the public eye, Sarah set her final plan in motion. She reached out to a journalist who had been sniffing around the financial scandal from a few years earlier. Sarah had carefully cultivated a relationship with this journalist, feeding him just enough information over the years to keep him interested, but never enough to publish a story, until now. In March 2020, the journalist published an exposé on Lisa's business, revealing years of mismanagement, unethical practices, and financial discrepancies. The article was brutal, painting Lisa as a greedy, dishonest businesswoman who had taken advantage of her employees and clients while secretly pocketing profits. The article was picked up by several major outlets, and within days, Lisa's name was all over the news. Her company's stock plummeted, and within a week, several of her biggest clients pulled their contracts. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. For Sarah, it was everything she had hoped for. She watched as Lisa's carefully constructed life came crashing down in a matter of days. But Sarah wasn't content to sit on the sidelines anymore. She wanted to be there to see Lisa's face when she realized that the woman she had betrayed all those years ago was behind her destruction. In late 2020, Sarah decided to confront Lisa directly. By this point, Lisa had lost nearly everything. Her company was on the verge of bankruptcy, her reputation was in tatters, and her once lavish lifestyle was a distant memory. Sarah knew that Lisa would be desperate, and that desperation was exactly what Sarah had been waiting for. Sarah arranged to bump into Lisa at a local event, a fundraiser for cancer research, of all things. It was the perfect setting. Sarah approached Lisa with a warm smile, pretending to be sympathetic to her struggles. They exchanged pleasantries, but Sarah could see the weariness in Lisa's eyes. As they talked, Sarah slowly began to reveal what she had done. She started small, mentioning the rumors that had spread about Lisa's business years ago. Then she casually dropped a comment about the journalist who had written the exposé, letting Lisa know that she had played a role in feeding him information. Lisa's face paled as the realization dawned on her. All these years she had thought that the world was simply cruel, that bad luck had followed her after her affair with Mark. But now she understood. Sarah had been behind it all. Sarah didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The look on Lisa's face was enough. As they stood there, Sarah calmly told Lisa that this was what she had deserved. that this was payback for everything Lisa had taken from her all those years ago. Lisa was speechless. She had no words. All she could do was watch as Sarah walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her shattered life once again. But this time, there would be no recovery. Sarah had made sure of that. As 2021 rolled into 2022, Sarah should have felt victorious. She had executed her plan flawlessly, and Lisa's life was now in complete ruin. The exposé had shattered any chance Lisa had of regaining her footing in the business world. Her company filed for bankruptcy by mid-2021, and the legal battles that followed were grueling. Lisa had no choice but to sell her home to cover the mounting debts and legal fees, and she moved into a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city. She had gone from a woman of wealth and influence to someone scraping by, her reputation destroyed and her future bleak. But Sarah wasn't there to witness this latest humiliation. She didn't need to be. The last time she had seen Lisa, the night of the fundraiser, was enough. The look of realization on Lisa's face, the dawning horror as she understood who had been pulling the strings, was all Sarah needed. It was the moment she had waited for. The moment she had fantasized about for 18 long years. For a while, Sarah reveled in the satisfaction of her victory. She would occasionally hear snippets of news about Lisa's ongoing struggles. Her health had taken another downturn, and she had been forced to abandon any hope of rebuilding her business. Her former friends and colleagues had all but deserted her, and even her relationship with her daughter had grown strained under the weight of Lisa's constant struggles. It seemed that everywhere Lisa turned, there was nothing but failure and disappointment. But as 2022 came to a close, something strange began to happen. The satisfaction that had once filled Sarah with every piece of bad news about Lisa started to fade. At first, she thought it was just a passing feeling, a momentary lull in her emotions after such a long, drawn-out plan. But as time went on, she realized it was more than that. The victory that had once tasted so sweet now felt hollow. Sarah had spent the better part of 2 decades planning, plotting, and waiting for this moment. She had built her entire life around the idea of revenge, allowing it to consume her every thought. But now that she had it, now that Lisa's life had been reduced to ashes, Sarah found herself asking, was this it? Was this really the end? She had imagined that revenge would bring her peace, that it would finally allow her to close the chapter on her painful past and move forward. But instead, she felt empty. The years of waiting, of watching Lisa's every move, had left Sarah with a void that no amount of destruction could fill. Sarah's children, now grown and with lives of their own, had begun to notice the changes in their mother. Emily, now 23, had asked her more than once why she still seemed so distant, even though the years of hardship were behind them. Jacob, at 25, was more blunt. He had seen through his mother's facade years ago and had grown frustrated with her obsession over the past. In late 2022, during a family gathering, he confronted her directly. "Mom, what was all of this for?" he asked one evening, his voice laced with both anger and sadness. "You spent years chasing this revenge, and for what? You're still not happy. You're still haunted by it. Do you really feel any better now?" The question hit Sarah harder than she expected. She had no answer for him. She had convinced herself that revenge would heal her, but now that it was over, she was beginning to realize that it had only deepened the wounds. For all those years, she had thought that bringing Lisa down would bring her the closure she needed, but instead it had left her feeling more lost than ever. As 2023 began, Sarah found herself reflecting on her life in ways she hadn't before. She had sacrificed so much for revenge, her time, her energy, even her relationships with her children. And now that it was over, she couldn't help but wonder if it had been worth it. Lisa, broken and defeated, had long since stopped being a threat. But in the process of destroying her, Sarah had lost parts of herself too. The person she had once been, the devoted mother, the loving wife, was now a distant memory, replaced by someone consumed by bitterness and anger. For the first time in years, Sarah began to question what came next. She had spent so long plotting Lisa's downfall that she hadn't stopped to think about her own future. And now, as the dust settled, she was left with nothing but the hollow victory of a life wasted on revenge. As 2023 came to a close, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She had finally achieved the revenge she had dedicated nearly 20 years of her life to, yet the emptiness that followed left her adrift. Lisa was nothing but a shadow of the person she once was, financially ruined, socially isolated, and fighting for her health once again. But instead of the satisfaction Sarah had expected, there was a gnawing sense of loss. She wasn't the same person who had started this journey. The realization hit her hardest in the quiet moments, when she sat alone in the house, the silence deafening around her. Her children had moved out, building their own lives far away from the wreckage of their childhood home. They visited on holidays and called every now and then, but Sarah knew the distance wasn't just geographical. They had seen the toll revenge had taken on their mother, and now they seemed reluctant to stay close to a woman who had let her anger fester for so long. In January 2024, Emily came to visit. She had just finished graduate school and was starting a new job, brimming with excitement about the future. Over dinner, they talked about Emily's plans, her hopes for the years ahead. But then, as the conversation began to wind down, Emily shifted the topic. "Mom," she started, her voice hesitant, "do you ever think about letting go?" Sarah stiffened, unsure where this was going. "Letting go of what?" she asked, though deep down, she already knew the answer. "Everything," Emily replied. "The past. What happened with Dad and Lisa? The revenge. I feel like it's been controlling you for so long, and I don't want you to waste any more time on it. Lisa's already... Well, you've already won, haven't you?" Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. For so long, she had justified her actions by telling herself that Lisa deserved everything that had happened to her. But now hearing her daughter say it out loud, that she had already won, made her realize something. She wasn't sure anymore if it had ever been about winning. Was there even a victory to claim? That night, after Emily had gone to bed, Sarah sat alone in the living room, the glow of the fireplace casting long shadows across the room. She thought about Emily's words, about Jacob's angry confrontation the previous year. Her children were right. In her quest to destroy Lisa, she had lost so much more than she had ever anticipated. She had missed out on moments with her children, moments she could never get back. She had distanced herself from friends, from opportunities, and from anything that didn't align with her obsessive need for revenge. But most of all, Sarah realized that she had lost herself. The woman she had been in 2006, the loving, hopeful mother and wife, was long gone, replaced by someone who had allowed anger to dictate every step of her life. And now, with Lisa thoroughly broken and defeated, Sarah was left wondering if it had all been worth it. As the weeks passed, Sarah began to reflect more deeply on the choices she had made. She thought about her confrontation with Lisa at the fundraiser, about the satisfaction she had felt in that moment, watching Lisa's world unravel. But now, with time and distance, that satisfaction felt hollow. The victory had been temporary, fleeting, and in the aftermath, Sarah was left to grapple with the consequences. In February 2024, Sarah made a decision. It was time to close this chapter of her life once and for all. She needed to find peace, not just with what had happened, but with herself. She couldn't undo the past, but she could choose how to move forward. In early March 2024, Sarah took a drive to a place she hadn't visited in years, her old family home, the house where she and Mark had lived with their children before everything had fallen apart. It had been sold long ago, but as Sarah parked outside and stared at the familiar facade, memories came flooding back. The laughter of her children playing in the yard, the quiet evenings she and Mark had shared before their lives had taken such a sharp turn. She hadn't allowed herself to come here during her years of plotting, too focused on her plans to face the pain of what had been lost. But now, as she sat in her car, she realized that this was what she had been avoiding all along. The grief of losing her family, the grief she had buried beneath layers of anger and revenge, was still there, unresolved, unspoken. Sarah didn't stay long. She didn't need to. Just seeing the house, confronting the memories was enough. As she drove away, she felt a strange sense of closure, something she hadn't expected. The revenge had never really been about Lisa. It had been about Sarah's refusal to let go of the life she had lost. Now finally she was beginning to understand that moving forward meant more than just breaking Lisa. It meant facing her own pain, her own choices, and finding a way to live beyond them. Over the next few months, Sarah began to rebuild her life, not in the way she had when she was plotting her revenge, but in a way that allowed her to heal. She reconnected with old friends, reached out to her children more frequently, and began volunteering at a local organization that supported women going through divorce and family trauma. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Sarah felt like she was contributing something positive to the world, rather than tearing it down. By the time June 2024 arrived, the 18-year anniversary of the day she had first discovered Mark's betrayal, Sarah found herself in a place she never thought she'd be, at peace. The anger that had consumed her for so long had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding of what she had lost and what she had gained. She would never forget what Lisa had done, and she would never fully forgive her. But Sarah no longer felt the need to hold on to the bitterness. In a final act of closure, Sarah decided to write a letter to Lisa, not to gloat or to reopen old wounds, but to say goodbye. She explained how the betrayal had devastated her, how she had allowed it to consume her life for nearly 2 decades, and how she was finally letting go. Sarah didn't know if Lisa would read the letter or if she would care, but it didn't matter. The act of writing it, of putting her feelings into words, was enough. In the letter, Sarah wrote, "I spent 18 years planning my revenge, thinking that it would give me peace. But the truth is, peace doesn't come from destruction. It comes from letting go. I don't expect you to understand that, but I needed to say it. I'm letting go now, of you, of Mark, of everything. I'm choosing to live my life for myself again." With that, Sarah sealed the letter, placed it in the mailbox, and walked away. For the first time in years, she felt free. Sarah's story isn't just one of revenge. It's a story of how anger and obsession can consume a life, leaving little room for healing and happiness. After nearly 2 decades of plotting and waiting, Sarah learned that revenge, no matter how carefully planned, could never fill the void left by betrayal. It wasn't the destruction of Lisa's life that brought Sarah peace. It was finally letting go of the past and choosing to live for herself once more. In the end, the greatest revenge wasn't the ruin of Lisa's life. It was Sarah's decision to rebuild her own.